I love to see the towns passing by and to ride these rails neath God's blue sky. Let me travel this land from the mountains to the sea, 'cause that's the life I believe He meant for me. And when I'm gone and at my grave you stand, say God called home your rambling man.
Welcome to Ramblin' Man Podcast, episode number 90. This one's with Samantha Preis, and we talk about what it's like being a musician in the time of COVID. It's great talk. I'm doing a few of these. It's interesting to hear different perspectives. If you'd like to learn more about Samantha, go to her website at samanthapreismusic.com, but Price is spelled Preis, music.com, and all the links are there. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Make sure to give her a follow on YouTube, but also make sure to go to her Patreon and support her on Patreon. You can Google Samantha Preis Patreon and land on it. Appreciate her being on. Sponsor this week is Feral Giant. Feral Giant is a graphic design, illustration, and social media consultation company based here in Knoxville, Tennessee. So they do work for clients big and small all over the country, all over the globe, in fact. But they also do photography, videography, video editing, and audio editing, website design, SEO, writing, content development. Hell, they'll babysit your kids if it nets them money. So make sure you give them a follow on social media on either Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Feral Giant. And be sure to give them an email today and hire them for your next project. Without much further ado, here's the episode. It's been interesting. And this is how it'll begin. And I'll even leave that part in. So I go to about 75 or more shows a year. Like I'm a big, as you can see behind me, that's all CDs. Like it's 3,000 plus CDs, tons of records, like big music nerd. And I think about 3 months into this, I had some friends being like, I need to start checking in on you because you're used to going out like 2 or 3 times a week to see shows. I was like, it's
such a different time.
It's weird. It's before times. What was it like for you? Were you playing out a lot or?
Oh God. Oh yeah. Well, we sort of right before the lockdown, I was on a tour in Europe with Devin Townsend, and the band went to
I've seen Devin Townsend live.
Cool. Yeah, no. We were on a tour together, and we went to 20 countries. So we were all over the place, and then the budget got cut for the set. We were supposed to do the second tour, and then the few people that were ended up doing the second tour, half the sort of band got cut on the second tour, really last minute, because we'd spent so much money doing the first tour that they had to eliminate most of the band and a lot of the special effects. But that tour actually, a week into the tour, we did one of the shows with them in New York, actually, my sister and I, but they had to leave early because of COVID. So we were just on a huge, European tour. And then before that, I was my life is completely night and day from what it was. I was, for the last 4 years, I sort of have been somewhat nomadic, I suppose. I was living out of a little suitcase, and I was traveling every 6 weeks to a new city. And to me, traveling is so inspiring. And really, I have my master's degree is in archaeology and cultural heritage studies. So I really love learning all about culture and immersing myself in new cultures. And I find it so almost like the music and the travel are so connected. I find that like seeing the world from a different perspective inspires my creativity. So constantly having something planned and like gigs planned and traveling to new cities all the time and meeting new communities and new musicians. And then, they know this person who sets you up with this. And it's just the momentum of it was so incredibly thrilling. And there was around every turn was sort of like the unexpected, which was so, and I suppose, I mean, you could still look at life like that. We don't know what's going to happen to us a week from now. But I think that from having done that for many years, my life completely changed during COVID. And I basically came back to London. I sort of like lived on and off in the UK for the last sort of 8 years-ish. And just decided to like rent traditionally again for the first time in like many, many years. And so I'm, back in London for, I don't know, maybe a few more. I could, I kind of want to explore a little bit and maybe try living other places, even if it means just traditional renting throughout Europe. Right. But I have so many things that I need to do that I really need to rely on like my studio equipment for. And the problem with traveling like I used to is that I often had to rely on studios.
Right.
So like I was restricted by where the studios were. Right. And, also you somewhat, and sometimes you have like the best, studio experiences and you love the result of what you worked on. But other times, like you have less control when someone else is engineering it or producing it. Right. And I ultimately, after having years of doing that, just decided I want the control. And so I started doing it myself, which is like, it's overwhelming, but I think it's worth it. And I'm sort of enjoying, like, in a sense, like being in one place for an extended period of time, because it's given me a chance to learn some of these programs and to really hone in on some of my skills that I didn't have the option to, explore when I was traveling like that. So it's been a really interesting time, like a very, very, even though I'm kind of in one place and my life looks completely different, very busy time. And I think that keeping busy is, even if it doesn't mean traveling or like, going on the types of adventures that you may have, been able to, go on a couple of years ago, creating small, achievable goals for yourself and filling your day with meaningful activities and things that matter to you. So it's definitely, it's been a really bizarre transition, but I'm staying very busy, and I think, what can you do,
For the like producing and engineering, since that's something kind of relatively born out of the COVID times for you, correct? Or a little bit before?
Like, you mean when I started doing it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've always had like a certain level of it, but that I could do. But
the focus has been more kind of.
I mean, I've been doing like projects for not only myself, but for like various other people. I'm working on a music video that I actually started, like I actually filmed it in 2019 for a track that's like I'm putting on my like upcoming album, but I'm finally getting around to actually like finishing the video and then just tweaking the track a little bit so I can put that up. And
but when it comes like the producing and engineering, is that something that once you got into it, you really enjoyed it and think you might do that for others, or you kind of mainly focused on yours?
Not at all. No, I'm just like, I absolutely hate it. And that's why it's taken so long for me to put out this album. Like I literally like put out this was one of the biggest mistakes I ever made, like ever. I put out I'll never do this again. I put out like a pre-order, campaign on GoFundMe. And I was like, I'll like take me like 3 months to do this and like totally like whatever. And I'll put up the pre-order now. And I was just like, no, like basically what ended up happening is there's a couple of things that are like that I would suggest, I suppose, unless you really love the process of, I do not love recording. I like writing. I find it a very therapeutic, very personal, meditative sort of process. And that is all I really care about. I don't even particularly love performing. I like the momentum around performing. I like meeting new people. I like engaging with other musicians, playing with other musicians. But it's not so much the actual performance itself, although often I do get up on stage and I'm like, I'm having a really great time. I love this.
Okay.
But I'm not generally like psyched to like, I think my favorite thing about music is writing.
Okay.
So the recording, there's a couple, I think the actual recording process, like it's very time consuming. It takes up so much energy and it really like takes me away from the writing process. While some of it might be kind of cool to see the end results of what you're doing, like I do most of my writing like away from the computer, whereas some people like rely on the electronic sounds and whatnot, and so their writing process is related to the engineering, but mine is sort of like that's sort of an afterthought. I'm more like acoustic and simplistic in terms of my music. So I just really, what I care about the most in my recording is capturing a vibe.
Okay.
So I might have to play something like 30 times to get the right vibe. And like sometimes you play something perfectly and then you listen back and you're just like, that's not what I want. I just doesn't sound like, it just didn't capture it there. And like, it's like grueling. I think that when you have really new material that you're recording, you're more excited about it too. But when you have been sitting on material that you've already performed hundreds of times at venues, recording it after you've already been performing it for many years is sort of like torture. It's like, it's really, because there's an element of when you first start playing something, you're really passionate about it and it really moves you and you're like excited to play it, to release it, to record it. But when you've written these things and you've already had them for a couple of years, it becomes like much more of a tedious process. So I think going forward in future years, once this album is released, I will most likely release a body of work at the end of each year, whether it's a 5-song EP or whether it's a full album or whether it's a few albums. But ultimately, like, I think that the best thing to do is record things when they're fresh, because you're going to get a better performance, because you'll still feel the music the way, it was meant to be felt. It's still raw. And I think you'll enjoy the process more,
Do you feel like that's something that's kind of changed in the industry and the mindset now? Is back in the day, it used to be you have to release an album, or even before that, it was like you have to release singles. Whereas now I'm seeing a lot of these, I don't mean to sound like an old man, these young people in their SoundCloud but I see like a lot of SoundCloud rappers and stuff that they're like, no, I released 5 songs because, I released one song and then a month later I released another song because that's what feels right to me.
I did that. Yeah. I did
it
that
doesn't
for like
have
years.
to be an album.
And I'm like, I don't like I think that each song deserves the spotlight. Each song deserves the stage and shouldn't have to be like tied to another, unless it's meant to be a concept album, that's different. But I think that each song is completely unrelated to me. And even like within the same year, I could be going through a lot of different things that I don't necessarily feel deserve to be like on the same album. I might feel like putting out a super poppy track with a rapper, or a really, I don't know, like a really bizarre track with someone, and then just just completely different genres. And it would be weird to put them on one album. So I think that rather than focusing on this like set structure that it has to be, I don't think it has to be anything. I think people should just try to write, with integrity and and just make sure that they love everything that they're doing. And other people will find what they're doing meaningful, regardless of whether that particular
Right.
song is tied to a bigger body of work, you know?
Yeah. I think it's all funny because again, music nerd, so I'm always looking for new stuff. And I'll use one rapper as an example. This guy, Cuz Lightyear, that's a younger guy. That I still remember when he first started. Man, what did he even have? He had like a Twitter and a SoundCloud, and he was like, no Spotify, no iTunes, no YouTube, no nothing. If you want to listen to my stuff, you got to listen to it on SoundCloud. That's where, and he was a kid. He was like 19. And then he did a song and did a music video. And then he had it. I don't even think it was on YouTube, his YouTube. I think it was on the director of the videos. Like, it was so crazy. I was like, this is so antithetical to me because I'm used to I want to listen to it how I want to listen to it, either a record or a CD that I can rip to a computer or, just something to where I can listen to it over and over again. So Spotify was just like, or not Spotify, SoundCloud was just like, that app is a pain in the ass. And I was like, damn it, kid. Like, I just want to listen to this song obsessively because it's a great song. But it was wild to me, like seeing somebody who was like 19 or 20 be like, nah, I don't want to do what everybody else is doing. Like, all right, kid.
And I think young people are like so fun to work with in that way, especially like in the studio. I like, if I do work with engineers, I like working with younger people because I find that they are just much more open-minded about, creative decisions, but also like there's no, it's just a very fresh perspective. And, I don't think there are any rules. I mean, this industry, if like that's even really a thing. I mean, I think people are so like not connected. They're doing so many different things, and there's so many like different sort of areas of music. And I think if you're like an alternative artist, like I'm like an independent artist that's sort of writing somewhat alternative music. So it's just not the same. I mean, some people like, they have the phrase like writing for the pool. And it basically is when you're writing, so maybe perhaps like in a formulaic way with the intention of making hoping that your song becomes a hit and making a lot of money.
That's Nashville to a T.
Right. And Hollywood, but just a lot of musicians are doing that, and that makes them really happy, which is totally, totally fine. That's not what I'm doing though. So I think that if you are trying to sort of write for the masses, and if you're trying to write like a pop hit or to sell your music to existing pop stars, then that is one way to do it. Yeah.
I was going to say, sorry, there's a huge, and I'm sure people like this too, this huge cottage industry. So I live in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I am in East Tennessee, but Nashville is to the west of us. But there was this whole movement in like the early 2000s to late 2000s, the aughts, that it was this East Nashville scene where it was all these East Nashville singer-songwriter people, not country, kind of folky, kind of Americana-y, that they would write songs and they just had a pipeline to like the CW, like the OC, and all those shows would just use their songs. And that's how they made their money. Like they didn't need to do anything else. They got usage rights for all that. And it was just crazy. It was like, man, so there are some times where there were some of them where I almost go, you're just literally writing a song because you're like, this kind of sounds like the song that I played before that got on the show on the CW. And I was like, okay. I was like, but the geek in me is just like, you can do so much better. I want to hear you do better. Like, I don't want to hear that same stuff again. And it's kind of, I don't want to say disappointing, but it's interesting seeing a lot of them now. Like, I don't want to say freaking out, but kind of freaking out because there's no TV.
I know.
And it's, what do you do now? What do you do now? Like,
I know. It's a crazy industry, and it's interesting. It would be interesting to know. I don't really know what people are doing. But
I will say one thing with the younger generation, there is no hesitation to be like, here is my Venmo. If you want to send me money, just send me money.
I've done it like a million times.
Oh, have you? I like that.
Oh, yeah,
it doesn't crack me up, but it's like, nah, it should, in these times.
Like if you go to my YouTube channel, like under my videos, like I think like the second link is like PayPal me.
Yeah, just PayPal me.
But I think it's like if you're going to post your videos publicly and you have like thousands of people watching your videos, and you have an option to put a caption, like by all means, like give people a way to send you money. That like don't be like you don't want to be too like asky about it. Like that kind of gets like tacky after a while, I think. But I think that to always have an option in under your video at some point for people to like donate, or I also have like a Patreon where people can subscribe to you on like in either a monthly basis or a project basis. And I've set mine up like as a project so that like if I want to take a couple months off, or if I'm doing private projects that I'm not like charging people just to do nothing. But some people do that though. But I think that I do it on a project basis. So if I put something up online, then it's sort of it's called my sort of label that I've created is called House of Sam Records, and it's made up of all my patrons. Like, so every time I release something, I sort of get that's how I get paid on Patreon by these patrons that like are able to make this happen. And then they also have like an exclusive that's attached to the release. It's something regarding the release that the public doesn't have access to usually. But I think also without that, it would be really difficult for me to like have the time to take the time, away from paid work to spend doing my own stuff. And like a lot of what like being a musician is like sacrificing really well paid work because you are passionate about what you're doing. But there's a point where you're like, okay. So the Patreon thing has been majorly helpful for me in the last couple of years. And when I'm active on it, it's like really great. I need to sort of like get back into that. But I've had so many like projects that have been keeping me busy. But I think by either the end of this week or I'd say like mid next week, I'll have something probably on YouTube, and then like I'll have a Patreon exclusive. But that, and then just to randomly wake up some days and just have like a donation from a patron, like it's like amazing. I mean, it's a great thing. So I think just be accessible, to people.
There's a musician I know out of Brooklyn that she will just go, she's kind of, I don't know what the hell you call her type of music. Like it's kind of ambient. It's kind of poppy. She was in a band called Au revoir, Simone. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
No.
Hell, they got a song in a commercial, and they were on the. Do you watch Twin Peaks? Did you watch Twin Peaks? Oh, okay. They were on season 3 of Twin Peaks. At the end of every episode, it ended in the bar with a band playing. And like one episode, it was 9 Inch Nails. Like and the 3 women from Brooklyn, Au revoir, Simone, they were on one of the episodes. And the woman I know is Annie, but she. Well, sometimes she has a little like tripod-y thing, sets it on the end of her piano, and like, you know what, the moment has moved me, and then she just plays something on her piano for 45 seconds, and she's like, looks at the camera and goes, "All right, guys, bye." And like that's it. And it's like every other day. She was like, "No, I just felt I'm going to hopefully interview her soon too," but she was just like, "No, I just wanted to do something." And she's like, "I never wanted to put like a limiter on it. Like I have to be on there for 30 minutes. I have to do that." She's like, "No." And then I have it. So that's it. Yeah. And it's like just kind of keeping her moving forward, keeping her going, which has been interesting. I've got another friend who does a Patreon that, there for a while, it was like she would actually record a cover every month. And it only went to the patrons. Like it was, I'll record a video and I'll have a friend come and play with me and like that. And then she sent postcards but it was the
Oh, I
craziest
do
thing.
that too. I do the postcards. Yeah.
But here's an idea. So she would
Yeah.
actually go to a used bookstore and find a bunch of free paperbacks and
Mhm.
rip the cover off the paperback and use that as the postcard. I was like, that's
Yeah.
brilliant. That's
I actually went to a bookstore as well, and I bought all these like vintage, like they were just selling them in bulk. They were like 10 for like a pound or something. And
yeah.
so I bought like all these postcards from
Damn it.
like the 70s or something. And so I have
I'm
all
gonna
these.
shake my hand at you because everywhere around here, you cannot get one postcard for less than like $1 or $2.
Oh yeah. Well, these some of the shops in London are really awesome. And like my
Yeah.
favorite like I had a bookstore up in East Finchley, I think called Black Gull Books.
Mhm.
And I was living up there for a bit, and it was like my favorite bookstore in the area. And so I used to go there all the time, and they had like the best selection of postcards. So maybe like twice a year, I'll send postcards out to my like patrons at a certain level, which is nice.
Well,
and
I've got.
think like,
I was going to say I still
No.
have a box down here because one year I oddly do something either on my birthday or there for a while I was doing it as I hate New Year's resolutions, but I was like, I'm going to do something creative. So I did, I sent a postcard every single day of 1 year, like every single day. Like, and I actually went and physically, like I wrote out the postcard. I didn't bulk anything. And it was a pain. It was rough. I was having to hit I would do a mixture of things. Like when I traveled, I would remember where I ate or where I visited. And I would bookmark those and write
it's amazing. It's like a dying thing. Like there's like a lot of like romance about sort of like postcards and snail mail. And like, I think it's so nice to get like an actual handwritten card from someone nowadays. I like treasure it, you know? So I think, I don't know if other people appreciate it as much as I do, but like I particularly like it. And I think that also like sometimes during certain times of year, like last year I did a really goofy Valentine's Day one where I like took my face and I like put it on a tic-tac-toe board. And I was like, I don't remember I think it was like You Won My Heart. And I sent it to like all my patrons around Valentine's. So that was fun. And then sometimes I'll do like one during the holiday season or you know, time, like I sometimes think about times where like people are most likely to be like lonely or just for, you know, it could be just for fun, or like if I had a particular patron for a couple of years and I know it's going to be their birthday, or if they're not well, because some of my sort of like fans they're so like lovely. And over the years, like they've written to me and like supported me in like various ways. And like, it means a lot to me, you know what I mean? And like, without these people, like, you know, they've given me like the self-confidence to continue to go on even in like the hardest of times. So I feel like I really like value those relationships a lot. And so I know like a lot of people like personally, where I've met them several times or we keep in contact on the internet. So it's a really nice, you know, it's a nice thing to have people like that.
Yeah, it's I will say it's interesting because I've been doing the music thing and I've just been lucky to be a lot of places. Every once in a while, somebody I know is I call them a blue check, like they're a blue check on Twitter, and you know they're famous like that. And I just laugh because one of my buddies has become, I think, top 3 biggest graphic designers in the world right now. His name's Draplin, like Aaron James Draplin, and he posted up this photo the other day and he name checked me, and I was like, oh shit, that's a dude with like 400,000 plus followers, and he just named. I was like, that feels pretty good, pretty nice. Like this doofy guy that I met like 11 years ago. That we were, I had seen him speak in Cleveland, Ohio. And then a week later, I went to a conference in Boston and he was there and nobody knew who he was at that point. And he was just standing off to the side. And I walked up to him because I'm 6'7" and I played sports. So I just walk up to people and be like, hey man, how's it going? Like, hey man, like that. And he was like, hey. And I was like, I saw you speak in Cleveland last week. He's like, oh, cool. And he started talking to me. He's like, can I hang out with you? And I was like, yeah, man, roll with me. Come on, let's go. And now he's,
like the blue check thing is just like it's just like such like garbage. It's just like
it's hilarious.
Thing, and it's like it's funny because like
I was going to say
I feel like
one other friend of mine who's a comedian who like wrote on the Borat films and shit. Like he's kind of from around here. And there was one, he's 6'1" or 6'2" or something.
Yeah.
And how I met him was I just went to his comedy shows. And then one time we were hanging out afterwards and he didn't really talk to me. His wife talked to me. Was hanging out and we were just riffing and joking around. And then all of a sudden he turned around and looked at me and was like, all right, before I leave, I got to hug you because you're the only person I've met that's bigger than me. And he just reached over and I was like, that's the blue check. That's my dumbass friend. He's nothing like fancy or anything.
Yeah.
That's how I look at that
like
stuff.
Funny because the blue check is like, I don't know. I think all the platforms do it like totally differently. I think like on Twitter, it's nice to have the blue. I think I love Twitter. I'm like obsessed with Twitter. I think it's like the best. Like, I think it's maybe the most underrated social network. It's like, I think it's the best one because I think that people are like really engaging and like really in conversation and like, but the cool thing about the blue check is like these quote unquote, like celebrities, like people that have a blue check, no one like knows. I mean, everyone's just like a person ultimately, like they're just like a normal person that like got some attention at some point in their life, but their life is still just like they're just a person. But I think it's funny because it does actually make it a little bit easier. Like if I'm like, hey, Sheryl Crow, what's up? Like, and she'll just be like or like respond to it. And like I've gotten in touch with like cool people just through, I think honestly, like they wouldn't have bothered. I don't know if you've ever seen what it looks like, but when you log into Twitter, there's a page for your general verifications and like where people have mentioned you. And then there's like a verified section. So I think naturally a lot of people that have the verified profiles can go and check which other quote unquote celebrities or other verified people have liked or messaged them. So it's like this elite, it's sort of like elitist or something. Like I feel like, but naturally I think people that have the blue check are curious, like, well, what other famous people are like that I don't know, or maybe that I do know are like giving me attention. So I think that if you do as a blue checked individual, like if you're going to, call out to someone or like something or mention someone, you're much more likely to get their actual attention than like the hundreds of thousands of people that are messaging them in the other columns that they're like going to check second or third. So like that's the one thing. And then I mean, like Facebook and Instagram are like the exact same company. So like Facebook has verified me, but like Instagram's like, you're not important enough. We don't care about you. Like I've applied like a million times. I've applied like 3 or 4 times and Instagram's like, no. And I'm like, what? It's the exact same company. So I'm just like, I don't know. It's really strange, but I know so many other really, really like so many much more successful, like much bigger, musicians with a much bigger following, but also like can't, for some reason they're not. And it's like verified on certain, it's just really strange. And ultimately it's all just like complete garbage. Like it doesn't actually mean anything, but it is kind of a cool feature, I think, like in terms of like actually meeting other people in the industry and getting people to acknowledge sort of just your presence and pay more attention when you react to things online. So it's kind of cool. But
that sounds like I need to kick up my banjo skills so I can get a blue check on there. Or I have this I actually have 3 podcasts. I have a podcast. I laugh because I see news people around here, like somebody who writes for the paper or somebody who's on the news that has like 120 followers and has a blue check. And I just laugh. I'm like, what are you talking about?
It's just normal people mostly. So
here I'll ask this question and I'll give you my thing as while you think about it. So I'm with you on the celebrity thing, but there are people that I would freak out. Like I don't know. Are you a basketball fan? Do you know Charles Barkley?
Not really, no.
Damn it. Okay. This is not going to land as well. Charles Barkley, round mound to rebound, like one of the one of the best basketball players ever, like top 20 easy. So I was at a cigar shop in Atlanta and he walked in and I just was like, that's Charles Barkley. Like I started freaking out. And my buddy who's sitting across from me is like, you have to go into the humidor and recommend a cigar to him. And I was like, yeah, I should probably do that. And he was like, no, get up now and go. And I was like, okay, man. Okay. And I went in there and I think he clocked me because he turned around, super nice. And he was like, hey, man, how's it going, man? And I went, yeah, I know. I almost went, I'm sorry, dude. But holy shit, you're Charles. Like,
I know.
So there are only two, I think, that I would like. That wasn't a freak out. I was just like excited.
It's really hard to know, like what to do when you really like. I mean, because it's an awkward situation to be in because when you see someone that you like really admire, or like in a big way, you're like, and I know people who, you know, they get really like uncomfortable when fans come up to them, like they're just socially awkward, so they don't know how to respond to it, especially when fans are like, you really like saved me, and people, and so I, you know, to me, when someone tells me that, I'm like, oh my God, that means so much to me. Like I'm so happy that someone, you know, would share that. But I think some people get like really like, oh my God, that's like too much, I don't even know how to respond to that, you know. And some people are like, so I think that like everyone's just really different. So for me, if someone came up and was like, you really turned things around for me at like the worst possible time in my life, and like your music like saved me, and that's happened like just a couple times, not like it doesn't happen all the time, but like when it has happened, I've been like, wow, like that. And I just it's so meaningful that someone would like share that. But yeah, other people find it like really awkward and don't know how to respond to it because like, so I don't want to in some ways, like I'd rather that one of my like idols didn't know I existed than think I was just like that really annoying girl that like came up to them. I'd rather they not know that like I existed at all than like be like, oh my God, that was really weird. Like, who's that? You know?
So it's weird. Because I don't have a lot of shame, apparently, I just go up and I don't give a shit. Like, and it's funny. It's exactly what you said, seeing the reactions from different people. Like there was somebody I saw that I knew of. I was like, I recognize that name. It turns out she was in a band that I liked.
Right.
And she opened for another artist here in town. And afterwards I went up, I was like, I need to buy her album. I was like, cause she's great. And I liked her, you know, and I walk up and like, there were 2 or 3 people in front of me, and I go up, I was like, hey, I was like, I know you from the band. And she was God love him, and you can fuss at me for this later. She was on Joe Rogan quite a bit. Like he's a big fan of that band. They're called Honey Honey. Mm-hmm. And she's like, oh, I see your kind. And she started pointing at me in every city, at least 1 or 2. Yeah. And it was funny. She was saying Joe Rogan fans. Cause she was like, I do this weird, like artsy, folky music. And yet I have guys that look like you, big dudes, are like, hey, I like your music. Like, and she was like, it's funny to me, like that these big guys like my sweet, endearing music. I was like, no, you're great, man. I love it. And then she kept talking to me, and I was like, are we going to go grab a beer after? Like, you're acting like my best friend. Like, it was hilarious. And her mom just kind of kept staring at me. I was like, all right, I'll let you go. She's like, well, what are you going to do now? I was like, I'm going to go home. It's nice to meet you. I was like, but then some people I've had to where it's like almost like staring at the ground. Like, I don't know how to talk to you.
And it's like, because, you know, like it's like a totally one-sided experience, basically. Like, you know, all this stuff about them, or like you've watched them over and over, or know, like, you know, their whole catalog or whatever the case, you know, and they know nothing about you. So like anything that you could say to them is like your own selfish experience with them.
Right.
And it's like, how do you even respond to that, like as another person? And I think it all comes down to whether people are like social creatures, and whether they have like sort of empathy and are able to be like, yeah, this person's like really awkward right now, but they're probably like really nervous, and they're like, as you know, this you know, social this figure that's being approached by fans, whether or not they in the moment are, I mean, anything, someone could be rude to you. Maybe they're having a really bad day. You never know what's going to happen. But I mean, if you feel that you should say something, I think if you can be as much of yourself as possible.
Yeah.
Like you can never know how someone's going to react to your energy. But I do think that it is an awkward situation as the fan, because it's like, you don't want to say what a million people have said to them, and how will what I say, what is the point of saying that to them when they've heard it a million times? You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, I wouldn't want to discourage people from saying something if they really wanted to.
Right.
So it's just it's definitely a really awkward position to be in, on both sides.
I will say it's interesting, because I've heard someone say, I think it was a comedian who said something to the effect of, he's like, I've heard so many people tell me how much this means to them to get to meet me. He was like, that's how I approach it. He was like, you're giving them a moment. He was like, this sounds snobby as hell. He was like, I've heard it so much that this is just how I react to this. He was like, you're giving them the moment of their life, the moment of their day, the moment of their week, the moment maybe of their year. So let them have their moment and just be grateful.
I wish that was, I mean, he's smart, and he obviously is a guy that is highly empathetic towards other people. And I think that that is the way that everyone should be approaching their fans. But I do know people that they just don't operate in that way, and they're just very I guess sort of introverted, and it makes them nervous to have any social interaction. So even though they seem to be this big, famous, successful person, ultimately they're just these really awkward people that don't know how to respond, and they're really overwhelmed. And I definitely don't feel that way. Your friend, I feel like it's really meaningful when people come up to me and say those things, but I definitely recognize that everyone's different, and so you can never fully know how someone's going to respond to you when you.
Not to keep harping on my size, but it's hilarious how much it comes up that. And there was one, it was a two for two comedians. Here, I'm gonna name names and see if you know. Bobcat Goldthwait. Do you know who Bobcat Goldthwait is? He was in the Police Academy movies doing this crazy voice, but then he became he's been a director. He was Robin Williams' best friend, like that. Wow. But he's also a stand-up comedian, all this. And Dana Gould, who is this actor, comedian, wrote on The Simpsons for 10 years. They performed. And after the show, you could see the difference between the two. Dana stood there and talked to me for 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And Bobcat kept looking at the ground, and I kept thinking, do I look like somebody who beat him up in high school? But it was the same thing. He was turned talking to the people who work there and was pleasant and awesome, but it turned around, and it was one of those, God knows, but I almost want to go, do you think Dana's got it? And don't worry about, he was super nice, but it was just so funny seeing the dynamic between those two. It's hilarious. So here's the question that I wanted to start out with. But although you kind of answered it already, is there anyone that you would just be like, I have to meet this person, and I may lose my shit, but I'm sorry, it's just got to happen? So for me, Magic Johnson was my hero growing up, basketball player. And I've always said, if I ever meet him, I'm just going to walk up to him and say, I'm going to hug you, and I'm going to start crying. It's just going to happen, man. Because he's 6'9", so he's even bigger than me. I was like, I have loved you since I was literally a little kid. Him and Kevin Smith.
Gosh.
Kevin Smith, the writer director. Yeah. I would be like, I have to hug you. There's not enough words that I could say, eloquently or otherwise, to explain how much you mean to me.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel that way about maybe not that many people. I mean,
obviously, Fred Durst and Chad Kroger, obviously. Fred Durst and Chad Kroger.
I mean, I sort of did this already. I mean, I fangirl. Basically, have you ever seen the documentary called 20 Feet from Stardom?
Oh, yeah. That's great.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
I saw this at like a little movie theater in Cape Cod like years ago, and I like just became like I was after I saw this, I didn't. I mean, it's like my favorite, probably
Yeah.
music documentary like I've ever seen. It's so amazing. And after this documentary, after seeing this, I was like, Lisa Fisher is a queen. Like she is an angel, like an actual angel. And so I was like, oh my God. And then like years later, I was able to like see her live at Daryl's house in New York. And
Oh, hell.
I
Nice.
literally like crying through the entire show. I mean, like I was like just tears streaming down my face the entire time. And I was like, this woman she is truly like a vessel.
Yeah.
She is like channeling, she's so in touch with like energy, and it's like magic what she, I mean, 2000 years ago they'd be like she's like a shaman or like a god, you know what I mean, because what she commands, the
Yeah.
energy that she commands, it's so incredibly beautiful. And I swear, if you're gonna pay like $300 to go to a therapy set, don't just go see Lisa. Be like,
So
you know what I mean?
the funny part
like,
I get out of that
worth
story
it. I should be her manager.
in my head is that you're pushing Daryl Hall out of the way to get to Lisa. You're like, I don't care about you. You're fine. She's awesome.
And I after the show, like I did follow her on Twitter, and she did follow me back.
Nice.
And I messaged her and I wrote her like a little message. I'm not sure if it was like before or after this, but like last year I wrote this instrumental track that I posted online on YouTube called Fleur de Lisa. And it was for Lisa Fisher. And it's just an instrumental track that I wrote on the piano. And I posted on YouTube, and I was like, in this song, I sort of presented this to her, and she had like the most lovely like response. And so we're like connected on Twitter, and we occasionally will just like emoji each. I mean, we haven't, but I was like, I love to buy you coffee. I'm like, I'm so awkward, but I love you. Like she's so wonderful, and like so sort of like underappreciated. I mean, she has a big following now, and she won like a Grammy for like, I think it was like the best song of the year or something, like in the like early 90s or late 80s. And then like had, I think, somewhat of a limited solo career, and mostly did like background work. But I think that this documentary really put her in the spotlight again, and like the really diehard like real music fans, realize that like no one is better than her. I mean, she's up there on the level of like Stevie Wonder and like Joni Mitchell for what she does. And she's not really, I think she does write music, but she is like such the most amazing, truly like artist and performer I've ever seen. Like really, truly a performance artist, and it has to be like seen and felt. And really, you can't. I mean, 20 Feet from Stardom did such an amazing job at like painting the picture of. I mean, I found her through video, so actually they did an incredible job of creating a fan base for her and like really marketing her or showing like the best sides of sort of what she does. But yeah, it's one of those things that you do have to see it live, and listening to recordings is not going to like give you the same picture. So if anyone, who's still actively performing, I don't think I have like any more respect for anyone than Lisa Fisher. And then Joni Mitchell is my, all-time favorite songwriter. Neil Young. I love Paul McCartney. Just trying to think of like people who are like alive that I would love to meet or have coffee with or have lunch with.
And throwing this out there, not to go negative, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. But we also live in this open age to where you learn so much about artists that there are some that's like, I either feel like I begrudgingly love their music because I grew up with it, or I've had to just be like, I'm done. I'm out. I can't do this anymore. And I wonder, has any of that kind of tarnished people you respected before?
Well, I mean, like, who knows what to think about like the Michael Jackson thing. I mean, I
Yeah.
still love Michael Jackson music, and I will still like actively, I mean, like Thriller is like the greatest thing that like ever happened. So I will always, I mean, love his music. I don't know what's true. I don't know what's not true.
Right.
I you know, like who even knows like whether any of it's true or whether all of it's true, or I don't know. But like that stuff is, you know, not great to hear.
I think the one I think about is Paul Simon, because
Okay.
I think it's as time has worn on, I've heard so many negative things from like the Los Lobos stuff to the lady blacksmith Mombazo, like just kind of like somebody being in the studio and he was like, oh, that's mine now. Like they play something or do something. And I was like, that's not
Oh wow.
good. So, oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Maybe I shouldn't
Yeah.
have said anything, but it's seeing that, but it's also, he's unbelievable talent, songs that will go down the record book.
Sure.
Some of the, but it's like, he's one that I'm like, man, I begrudgingly feel like him
Yeah.
because a
I just
lot.
don't like that. I try to like separate it. I'm just like, you know what? This person probably has like a lot of like social issues, but that doesn't make them any less of a genius like in this
Yeah.
area. And like what I was saying about Lisa and sort of people who are these like vessels, and it's like a talent that you can't, it's like they're born with this gift and they just
Right.
have this ability to, but a lot of musicians I know, like they're not particularly well-rounded people, or they're not socially like intelligent people. They're like, they have extreme, like they're like extremely like they're geniuses in like this one area, but then
Right.
in the rest of their life is like completely like dysfunctional, or that seems to be the case with not just artists, but like a lot of people are like that. People have like their strengths, and then they're just like, there's other areas of the life that are completely out of control, or like we were talking about before, like musicians who are completely brilliant and they have no ability to talk to people like whatsoever. They're just like really bad with social interaction. So it's like I try to just not like let any of that stuff prevent me from listening to their music, because like it's like their contribution in that area, like we can't be everything, we can't
Right.
have everything, and we can't please everyone. I mean, it's a little bit like a different situation when you're like, it's like the Michael Jackson situation or like the Bill Cosby situation. That's like really depressing, and like especially if you were like directly involved in it, like if you were actually
Yeah.
the victim of it, that's like a little bit different.
So
But,
I will say it's weird. And I had this conversation with my buddy Brandon about this. I was like, the Bill Cosby, once kind of it all came to hit, like he was like, that's the first tape that I bought
Yeah.
on my own, was the best
Right.
of Bill Cosby.
Right.
I was like, but once all that started coming out and it was true, it was like all the tapes, all the CDs, all the vinyl, I took it to a record store and I was like, I don't want any money for this. I just can't have this in my house anymore. I
Yeah.
can't do it. But on the flip
Yeah.
side, I still have R. Kelly CDs over there.
Okay.
And I'm like,
it's never
I'm like,
happened to me, like
yeah.
definitely with a musician. Like I still feel like Michael Jackson's Thriller will still be on my top 10 albums probably for the rest of my life.
I still have Michael Jackson CDs up there.
Yeah, I mean,
like it's like,
but like that's the only thing I can
Yeah.
like directly think of. Where artists like I've met people that were like really weird, but like not in a way where I would like take it personally,
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can see that. It's it's all, let's here, we won't keep going down the negative path. I'm going to completely transition. So you're living in London, right?
Mhm.
But where are you originally from? Like,
I'm from Connecticut.
oh, okay.
I'm from about an hour drive from New York City originally.
So what, like, did you grow up in Connecticut, or
Yeah.
did you all travel around a lot, or like
I grew up in Connecticut. I still go back there. Like I'm
Okay.
probably in Connecticut like 3 or 4 months of the year. I go back like three times a year-ish, and I usually go back for like a month or 6 weeks. I have a lot of friends in like the New York tri-state area. So I used to perform. I used to live in New York as well for
Okay.
3 years, and then I was in after when I was like in after high school, I went to college in Boston. And then I was there for 4 years. I spent a little bit of time in Greece as well, just like on like a broad program through Berkeley. And then I moved to New York for 3 years, and I was doing sort of like corporate like work for Lincoln Center and Carnegie Hall.
Okay.
And I was working part-time and trying to like sort of make it work with like residencies at like different jazz bars and just performing. And it was just like so hard. And I think in 3 years, I didn't save any money at all. Like I had like negative money. I had no money. And I
think that's every artist.
It was not like fun. It was terrible. And I needed a change. I just feel like New York is a really hard city to live in when you like don't have a lot of money. Like I think it's like terrible. It's actually like, it's really hard when you do even, it's just like, it's just dirty. And like, I love New York, but it's just, there's not a lot of like, London's cool because there's so much green space. It's 40% of London is green parks, 40%.
Okay.
So there's parks everywhere, and you never feel like you're in that like tight grid system. Like you always feel like there's like fresh air around you, and there's like parks and green, and like I love that. I think you get a little bit more for your money here. Not that like I love Greenwich Village in New York. I love like just like that downtown area is like I love it. But I also have like I've lived there for so long, and as a poor person, and it was just so hard. It was such a hard period of life that I do like go back there frequently, and I like go to just to concerts and see friends and perform. But it was tough to live in New York. And then
I was going to say, there's a buddy of mine that this was like 3 or 4 years after we got out of college. He and I actually started like specking, like, all right, can we go, you and I move to a bigger city, like from East Tennessee all the way up, to New York. I looked at New York, Chicago, and London. Because at that point I'd not been to San Francisco, and I would like after I started traveling more, San Francisco is up there for me. But we were laughing because we started looking at cost and everything. I was like, how the hell does anyone ever do this? I was like, my house, I bought this house in like 2004, 2003, and I paid $83,500 for it.
Wow.
And I was like, how does anyone move from like this area to New York? I was like, you would have to just have loads of money, or it blew. He and I together were even like, can we share a bedroom? It's like, we can
buying property in London and New York is like very expensive, but like renting, it's still really expensive. Like, but when you only know that, like I just was like living in one overpriced city after another. So like I'm used to paying like Boston prices, New York prices, London prices. So it's like, it's actually like the opposite, where everywhere you go, even as a poor person, you're like, oh my God, it's so cheap. Even when you're making like no money, you're still like, oh my God, how is this like this much? Or, but yeah, it was difficult. And after like 3 years of just like hating my life basically in New York, I did have good times, but it was it was overall really hard. I like lost my grandfather, who was like hugely part of me, and he like just like he was like the rock of our family. He was really like the patriarch of our family, and it was like devastating to the entire family. Like my uncle moved out to California after he died. I mean, it was just like a mess, and it felt like our whole foundation was like shattered, and like it was already like it had already been like a difficult 3 years for me, and I felt like I just need like a change. I need like to do something completely different, and like I literally gave up music for like a whole year, and I went to London and I did a master's degree because I was thinking, all right, well, if I'm like I'm barely like getting by in New York, trying to work like multiple jobs, trying to like do this performing thing, and it's just like not working. And I need like, maybe I should, my mentality is like, maybe if I'm gonna make money doing something during the day, then it's gonna be something that's not music, but that's something I'm really passionate about. Like maybe being I did some curating work in New York for an art gallery, just a very small one, but when I I was like, maybe I could do some, I really love archaeology. I've always been obsessed. When I was a kid, I used to like be able to write in hieroglyphics, and I was like obsessed with Egyptology and dinosaurs. I knew every single dinosaur. I've always loved archaeology since I was a little kid. And so I thought, I think I might just like get into like the museum world and like and get like a job at a
Mhm.
museum. So I went to London and I did my master's, and I spent a year there. I had like virtually no time for music. And I realized that even though it was like the greatest year, I had like an amazing time, that I could never actually like dedicate that much time. If I ever was a student again in any other discipline, I would never sacrifice music on the level that I sacrificed that year.
Okay.
I would never go back full time unless I would like, it was directly in my field of study. So
Have you been in London ever since then?
I've been like mostly in the UK for the last
Okay.
8 years, but not necessarily in London specifically, like kind of all
Okay.
around. So I came to London to do a master's. And then like when I finished the master's, I started like applying to jobs, while doing the music thing. And I just felt like I, you read these job descriptions and some people like, they're just things that like people just, they're like, oh, you need 2 years of experience
Yeah.
on this software program that like a monkey could learn in 30 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and you're like, okay, these are going to be like jobs where I continue to be like undervalued and I'm not like
Oh,
super
yeah.
stimulated and I'm just trying to like earn money.
I laugh.
Ultimately,
So
I just need to pay my bills. And I was like, I'm not going to be happy in a
my
9 to 5 job of
yeah,
any
my
kind.
my main career is graphic design. And it
Yeah.
cracks me up how many times you'll see a job listing and it'll say minimum 3 years experience. So that's minimum. Entry level position, must
Yeah.
know, and they'll list all the design apps. And they'll be like, and also you need to know code. You need to know how to edit videos. You need to know, like, it lists all these advanced things. And it's like, and we're going to pay you $30,000 a year.
Right.
And I was like,
Right.
you are
Right.
out
I
of
just
your
felt like,
damn mind, man.
yes. But I just felt like, you know what, like I really felt like having worked doing these part-time jobs
Right.
like for years and just trying to like support myself, doing the performing thing. I was like, I am never going to be happy like
Right.
working for anyone else. And so I just had to like work a lot harder to be my own boss.
What is your, not to, there's a dangling thread that my OCD is wearing out. What is your master's in?
Archaeology.
Archaeology. And
Mhm.
you said you were at school in Boston and you went to Berkeley.
I went to Berkeley.
Did you
and
go
then
to
I
Berkeley
went
for music?
for music. Berkeley
Holy
only,
shit.
in the Boston, Berkeley.
Talk about what is it, burying the lead? Like that's a big BFD, man. That's a like
Yeah, so like I went to Boston for music, and then I went to
Yeah.
London I went to UCL for my master's, and then
Okay.
like I
What is
definitely feel like
UCLA? UCL.
UCL in London, University College London.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I mean I don't regret it for 1 second. It was like one of the best years of my life, and I've totally fell in love with like England. I think it's an amazing place, but yeah, I think that over like a long period of time, I just kind of realized that I never want to work for anyone else again. And
Your
so
master,
that keeps
yeah, I was going to say,
path
wait,
ahead, like
yeah.
it's like in some ways that path is a really scary path
Yeah.
when you're self-employed and you're like no one is guaranteeing my paycheck, and it's been like really scary at times,
Yeah.
and like super stressful, but it gets like a little bit easier every year, and like you learn different strategies and just try out a million things and fail at a lot of things, but ultimately it's like a learning process. And I think that like you are, they say you are what you do with your attention, and if you're really committing yourself to something, it will grow. And if you
Yeah.
don't give up and you continue to try a million different ways, and just see every failure as a learning experience and getting you that much closer to not failing and
Right.
actually succeeding. It's all part of that like quote unquote journey, and I think that it's been quite a journey and I'm still on it, and sometimes it's really difficult, but I think I'm optimistic. I'm
Yeah.
optimistic about the future. And I think there are a lot of good people out there. There's a lot of like insane talent and things to be, experienced. And even this whole COVID experience has been a growth like period and a really actually special opportunity in some ways where you're not just, I think in the past, like this generation is just very like with social media and the internet, people are very distracted by shiny things that they go on to their social media platforms and they look at someone else's page and they say that person looks like they're having a better time than me,
Right.
and like
Right.
how crappy my life is compared to that person's, and everything is people trying to like compare themselves to other people or to other experiences. Like traveling is such a big thing that people want to do, and like, and you like everyone's just always bragging and like posting all these pictures on social media that make them look like the most adventurous people you've ever met, and ultimately like them, you're like, you're the dullest person ever. But like anyway, like I'm glad that you went on to that mountain like that one time on that hike. But like I think that like, so everyone is has like, it's like this level of like FOMO, like fear of missing out, and always trying to like, I don't want to say it's all about competition, but it's almost like, well, I don't want to. There's like pressure. There's like pressure to like do fun things even.
Right.
And I think so. So like the last couple of years when I was traveling, there's a lot of it that's like really exhilarating, and there's also some of it where it's a little bit stressful. And for like once, I mean, I know people, because I was a somewhat like nomadic person for a long time, that are still doing the nomadic thing. And
Right.
I mean, in tropical countries, like they're not as affected as COVID because it's sort of like a cold virus. So in countries where the weather is colder, people the higher numbers of COVID seem to be happening. So, but in some of the warmer climates, like it's just not, they're living like no, everything's open. They're water sports every day, beach, cocktail, like it's nice. So like
Right.
I could be living like that. But I think this has been a really interesting time where like the world doesn't expect anything of anyone right now.
Right.
For 1 second, it's kind of okay for people to be like, you know what? I'm like not doing anything right now. It's just been a really tough time. And everyone's like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But like, I think there's so much pressure all the time. Like, that people in this generation, like feel so pressured, and that it's sort of been like an interesting moment where like, for once in our lives, since like before the time of like social media.
Yeah.
That people have felt like maybe it's okay to like not have to do anything or be super productive right now.
One of the other ways I make money is do digital marketing and social media for people. And I've ended up being on a bunch of nonprofit boards, but it's, companies, individuals. Like right now I seem to be focused on like more smaller, like a screen printing shop in Cleveland, Ohio, a guy who does, art hanging and art curation for people around town. That he did it in Boston too. But and I end up going and talking at schools a lot to kids. And of course I don't use salty language when I'm talking to kids, but whenever I talk to anybody, I'm like, social media is bullshit. You're seeing shot 23 of 37 photos.
Yeah, everything's like curated, carefully curated, make you appear that things are going swell in your life, and it's not real. And like I spent a lot of time also doing social media for people. That's one of the ways that over the years I had digital marketing and social media, which is a really helpful thing to do if you're a musician, because then you learn how to do it yourself, for yourself. But in the past was on social media all the time. And like, I actually have people now like that are sort of like fans, and they message me and they're like, are you okay? Like, we haven't seen you, like we haven't heard from you. And it's just like at a certain point, you just get like totally exhausted by the whole
Right.
thing.
Right.
And you're just like, I don't care. And I don't know. I think a lot of people have hit that point where like a lot of people I know like don't have Facebooks anymore. They're just completely off social media. And I think that the challenge with that, when you are like a social figure, like quote unquote social figure, is that like, and this is one thing that so many musicians like don't understand about this business. And this is what we're talking about before about people being well-rounded. Like, some people are really geniuses in one area, but they have absolutely no business sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
And in order to like make it work in this industry, unless you're like the 1 in a million person that just gets handed some like contract or like major budget, you have to function like a business.
Right.
So like, to be completely off of social media, unless you are privately writing, like your friends you were talking about who are writing songs and submitting them to other artists for like, or like that are writing for film, for example, like that they don't really need to be on social media. That's a sort of, that's a way to do it. But I think that if you are the artist, sort of like your audience is, it's almost like you can be a successful artist and never set foot on the stage in this day and age.
Oh yeah.
If you're good at social media and digital marketing without a huge budget, you can still be really successful. If you know and understand what people are using these platforms for, and the psychology behind social media. And the thing is, it's more than that. It's like whether you want to, after knowing like sort of all there is to know, not that you could ever know all there is to know about anything, but knowing all this about social media and marketing and a human psychology, it's whether you want to, try to like constantly like portray this image.
Right.
It's exhausting to keep up that image all the time and to just constantly be responsible for, 3 to 7 posts per week on every platform and constantly like sending out newsletters. And like, it's just like enough at a certain point. Everyone, I think, at a certain point wants to take a break. And that's why it's good to have someone doing that. If you can afford to hire someone to do those things, it's worth it.
And for some of those, always my advice to people is you don't have to post in the moment. Bank content. Bank content like crazy. I was like, and there's been many people I've told of like, there's going to be days where you're going to wake up and you're like, I don't want to people today. I was like, guess what you do? You go into your little photo gallery and you're like, oh, here's a cool photo I took 6 weeks ago. And you just literally like, and it's like, think about it in like cubits of time. I was like, that takes no time to then just go online and be like, it's a great day to have a coffee.
You know what though? Like for me, because I'm like a total perfectionist, I'll have like the same picture of like the skyline, but it's like slightly different. It's like, oh, I moved like a millimeter to the right. And then I'll like put a couple of filters on them and then I'll like save them as drafts. And then like, but I've looked at this too much. So I'm going to have to come back and look at them both in an hour because I don't know which one I like. So I'm like, okay, just leave it in drafts and then like go have your dinner and then come back to it and look at them with fresh eyes again and then decide. So it actually takes me like realistically, I will literally just, and I'm not like going online and professionally editing this. I'm talking about like Instagram filters, but I'm just like, and I've tried to like get out of that and just like post it. Like no one cares.
Just post it.
It's like a freaking picture of like a forest. Who cares? But I like the artistic side of me is just like, oh, which one is the best? And it's just like,
what is that phrase? Done is better than perfect. I can't remember how that phrase goes, but it's like just doing it as is better than trying to perfect. So I went and did a photo shoot with a friend of mine, and I'm even though I've been a photographer for years, I usually take weird artsy photos.
Mhm.
So I'm still not great at shooting people. Like,
Okay.
because I think sometimes I'm a little too direct. I was like, eyes, look up that way. Like, and you
Okay.
can't do that to people. You can't, like, you have to, was a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. So right before the pandemic, I started photographing people more to get, and usually people I knew, so I could get more comfortable with it. So one friend of mine, she's just artsy and freewheeling as shit. Like, and she has this gorgeous new house. And she was like, I like just walking through the woods. I was like, can we do some photos? Because I'm helping her with her website. And she was like, yeah, that'd be great. So I went and I got nervous and I shot outside and I shot auto and wide open the whole time. So the whole time she's in focus and everything behind her is in I was like,
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
no, it's not good. In my mind, I was like, no, it needs to have some kind of And so I just, same thing, artist. I'm just so self-critical or same thing. It'd be like, here's 10 photos of her in the same place. Now, which one's perfect? Which one is she?
Yeah.
And at some point I was like, I need to just work all of them and just give them all to her and be like, here you go.
Yeah.
You get to determine which one is the better one.
Exactly.
Like, it's just, and it's same thing like, doing logos and stuff. There's a lot of times where I will do something. I like to work late at night. And then I'll just, at some point, I'm like, you know what? Save. And then I go to bed, get up and look at the next morning. It's like, oh, here's what I should have done. And I figure out what those things
Yeah.
are.
And the same with music. It's like I can only do like sit down for a few hours because then you don't even know what you're hearing anymore. And you start picking apart things and just being like an insane perfectionist. It's not helpful because you don't have any like perspective anymore when you're like fully in and been just over focusing for way too long. So I think with any like visual art and music, I think it's really good to like step away from it like several times a day, and even just like for several days or several weeks, depending on what kind of project. I go through periods of time where like, and some musicians would be like, that's sacrilege, I would never say that, like, I don't know. Some people are really like, no, I'm like totally happy doing something for like 8 straight hours a day. And I'm like, I don't have anything that I would want to do for 8 hours a day. And I don't even have anything that I'd want to do every day. I go for walks. If I could get paid to just walk, I would love that. It'd be a great career if I could just get paid to like take long walks for like 90 minutes a day.
Dogs. You just need to become a dog walker.
No, just by myself. I just want to like observe things on my own. Like I want to like take where, I love walking. But other than that, like I sometimes will have to step away. I think that you need music sometimes. Like you need ice cream sometimes. But if you have too much ice cream, you don't want it for a while. Right. Or when there's so much stress around music, you are like, I need a break. Like I need to take a long break and I need to really want this again, because you want to keep it this like sacred thing that like means something to you in a way that you can continue to make music that you feel. Right. And that's what music is like to me. And that's the way that I approach music. But I know plenty of people that they're like, I play music all day, every day. Mm-hmm. I love it. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, I'm often working on music every day, but like, it's not necessarily because I love it. It's because like, I have to make money. And, but I do love writing, but it's like, it's also just like a love. It needs space. I need like space. So at times I'll just be like a machine and I'm constantly inspired for like a couple months at a time. And then I won't want to play anything or like write anything for several months at a time.
Do you think some of that is bore out of like self-criticism, or do you think it's just, you don't want to get stuck in that kind of, I don't want to say monotony, but you're like, I've been going down this path too long. I feel like I'm just spiraling
I think it's
repeating.
Just like sometimes like sort of like the way that I write is like I was talking before about this concept of like being like a vessel.
Right.
And sometimes I feel like, especially recently, because I've been so busy with like just recording and like technical stuff that like is just such a bore to me, but it has to be done, that I've had to take a step away from like the actual writing process. And it's like, I feel guilty when I pick up my guitar, when I said the piano, because I'm like, I have so much to do right now. I can't be doing this. But I can like feel when I'm suppressing something.
Yeah.
When I'm suppressing a song, it's like in there and it's like tapping me like a child, like, Mom, you know what I mean? I'm just like, no, like I have so many things to do. Like I'll just wait. But I can sort of like feel it when I have like something waiting to come out. And like, I don't know if how many other musicians feel that way. But like to me, it's all about feeling and not about anything else.
Okay.
So yeah, I have to feel it and I have to like want it, or else I don't want it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, in the realms of dangling threads, like there are three ones. So you said you worked at Lincoln Center in like a administration capability.
I literally worked at like a call center. I literally worked like calling like subscribers and like patrons and like convincing them to like buy like the worst people. They're like, hi, I'm calling from Carnegie Hall, like to renew your subscription package.
Oh my God.
And like it's like telemarketing basically. So I was doing that like just part-time when I also did some preschool teaching. I was like an art music teacher at a preschool. I did some like curating at like an art gallery. What else did I do? Oh
I was getting excited, but
my life, it's crazy.
Because I know Wynton Marsalis was the jazz side of the Lincoln Center, correct? Was that before you? Was that before?
I think he was ongoing, like doing some stuff with like both of them. And I also, when I was at Berkeley, I would put on my little penguin suit and I would work as like an usher at Boston Symphony Orchestra, which was like one of the best jobs ever. Like I literally had the best memories of college. Were working for the BSO, and we literally went to hundreds of concerts, the biggest people like you've ever heard, and all of us that were working there were artists and musicians. So it was like such a ball. Like we literally had the time of our life working this like minimum wage, like basically minimum wage. Like we had to put on the stripes and the bow ties, and like honestly, it was like one of the greatest things like ever. So
I've worked for myself. I think this August will been 5 years. And I, in that first year, went and got my bartender's license, because my thought was there's one music venue here that I would love to be a bartender at, because the two bartenders on the sides, all they do is crack beer open and hand it. That's all they do. They don't mix drinks. I was like, then I wouldn't have to pay for tickets to those shows, and I could watch those shows and get paid. And then I called and they were like, well, you don't have enough bartending experience. I was like, to crack beers open? Like, what the hell are you talking about? And it was funny because I had two friends that worked there. One of them was a dude, and he was like, we have no male bartenders here. He was like, so I have to carry all the kegs. Will you please come so I will have a second person to help carry kegs and carry cases of beer? He's like, because I'm getting too old for this shit. He was so pissed. He was like, I just need one other person. He was like, and it's not a slight against men versus women or anything. He's just not a small dude either. And he was like, I need one other person who can pick up a keg. Please come work here. And then the manager was like, can you send me your resume of all the bars you've worked at? I was like, what the fuck? I'm cracking beer open for like $5 an hour. What are you talking? I just want to be able to go to my shows without having to pay to go to my shows.
Oh my God.
So Wynton Marsalis, I think, is one of those people that he is somebody that is like, man, if I could ever just sit and listen to him talk for like 5 hours, I would love to, because he's fascinating. The whole history of like his brother and his dad, and just
they did a lot of stuff. He did a lot of stuff with like Berkeley as well. So like there was always like something on like BSO, Berkeley, Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center. It was like a recurring theme.
So, and I will say it's weird because how much do you know anything about East Tennessee? Like, or is that
Not really, no.
so you know
I've
more
actually
about?
I was in Tennessee for like a few days when
Yeah.
I went to Bonnaroo when I was
Oh,
18 years old. Yeah.
so the guy who essentially created Bonnaroo, that company is based here in Knoxville, AC
Okay.
Entertainment.
Mhm.
But so East Tennessee, foothills of the Smokies, like a lot of like roots and country, like Americana, bluegrass, all that kind of stuff. I don't want to say country, but was born out of here. Well, came out of here, and we have one of the world's most well-regarded radio stations here called WDVX. If you ever want to look it up, WDVX, you can stream it online. It was started in a camper out in the country, but it
Okay.
is like I'm trying to think of a good example. Do you know Jim Lauderdale?
No.
I'm trying to think of like John Prine. So you talk
Okay.
about songwriting.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
John Prine was a big fan of WDB. Like it is the station to beat all stations, like all kinds of people. But because that's located here, we would get a lot of shows where we would see a lot of people that were like Berkeley graduates, like Sierra Hull, who went to Berkeley and learned banjo. Like, and it was crazy seeing like these, or the Punch Brothers. Punch Brothers is another good example of just people who are masters at their instruments. And it never dawned on me. I was like, oh yeah, people can go to Berkeley to learn how to play or to get proficient or better at the mandolin or the banjo, where I'm used to some dude sitting, you know, and some back of some corner store down here out in the country who's like a master banjo player, but he's just some dude who probably didn't graduate high school. And he's master. And then started seeing those people on stage, and it always kind of blew my mind. I was like, huh, that's a thing. Okay. Like I don't know. It never clicked in my brain because I think I was just so used to people down here who just started playing when they were kids. There's a shop here called Ciderville Music Store. That same thing. It's like Tony Rice, all those like master artists who are songwriters and stuff would just go in there and play on a Saturday night like it was no big deal. Like it's crazy, this town. And because we have that pedigree of Ashley Capps is his name, that he used to run music joints here, but then he started AC and they do Bonnaroo, Forecastle, all kinds of festivals. And then they manage a bunch of theaters to where it's like, there's a lot of people who come through town because of Ashley. And I'll tell you the biggest thing to look for. We have an event here called Big Ears Festival. It's funny how many times I turn this podcast into a sales tool for my city because I love my city so much. And but Big Ears is like the most avant weird music festival in the world. Like people literally come from Norway to East Tennessee.
Wow.
To hear like Harold Budd performing. Like you can just start naming off all these weird like jazz and ambient people that come and play. Terry Riley curated it one year. Two of the guys from the National, the two twins, they curated it one year. Like it's the craziest thing that just all these people from all over the world descend on my city. So we have this crazy pedigree here of great music, but it is funny, like hearing somebody like I've got to see Hillary Hahn perform a few times, and it's same thing of just hearing about that world, like the whole Berkeley music scene, any of that, to where that fascinates me. Like,
well, actually, like the Southern music culture fascinates me, and I have wanted to. That's another thing that it's like so totally on my to-do list. Go down to Tennessee and New Orleans and Austin, Texas, and all these really cool like music cities. I really like living in a city though where you don't have to drive. I really love London because you can just like you don't have to have a car.
You were mentioning that earlier when you were talking about New York. I want to say I love like New York, Chicago, and San Francisco because I feel like what you were saying about like the grid and all that. I was like, I love that because I feel like I fly in, I don't have to worry about driving, and I can
Yeah.
just disappear in the city and find all
Totally.
these
Public
nooks and
transportation is like
crannies.
the coolest thing. So that's one of the reasons that I haven't like sort of like gone out to Nashville or like I mean I have no excuse to
You're
not
good. You're
visit
good.
it, but you know what I mean? Like
Nashville sucks. Nashville, I call it Brooklyn South, and it is the number one destination for bridal showers,
oh
bridesmaids.
yeah, really? Is that
That
true?
tells you like it is just one big drunken mess. And they're trying to make it kind of techie now. It's not what it used to be. Like if you're wanting to come down here and see music, like Memphis, Knoxville, Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah, I hear Asheville is really cool.
Asheville's great. And even Atlanta. Atlanta has this crazy scene that was kind of like rap, but then it's just kind of grown from there.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really had an opportunity to experience like genuine Southern culture, which I'm like really, really fascinated by. And yeah, I mean, at some point, what I would really like to do is take like an extended road trip, sort of like in the way that I was doing it before, where I stay, a couple of weeks or like a month or more in one city and then move on to another. So it could just be like a whole year long like journey across the United States. And maybe if I were to do that, I would just schedule, like a whole tour around it. But I really like to be able to immerse myself in one place for a month or 6 weeks, because you don't really like absorb what's going on if you're just coming and going all the time. And like the tour like experience is fun, but I think your experience is more like the people that you're touring with. Because you're not in anywhere long enough to really get a sense of like what it is. You just have like a very bird's eye view for like 2-3 hours that you have free during the day.
I think that's what, that's what kills me, is being someone from here and knowing like the hole in the wall restaurant that if you came to town right now, I'd be like, okay, what do you like? Are you vegetarian? Like I would run through all the things and I'd be like, okay, then here's where we're going. And then seeing somebody big like Bill Burr, he came through here and did a show at the Tennessee. And he said, yeah, we went and got barbecue at that place. And then he mentioned the name of the place and you heard everyone in there groan. Because they're like, oh, why would you go there? Like, it's terrible. And he was like, he actually got kind of mad. He's like, shut the hell. He was like, I know. He was like, I know. I'm not a local. I asked online where I should go. And that's the number one place. I was like, I almost went, excuse me, Mr. Burr, next time you come to town, here is my phone number. I will take you to 3 places that you will want to move from Los Angeles to here.
I love that. I love when locals do that. And I do that. People always, all my friends are always like, you should start like a walking tour company. Because I'm constantly like, did you know that in 1757? And people are like, really? Like, and I'm fascinated by history, and I love the cities that I visit, and I frequently, so I learn all this information about the history, and like I go to like folk concerts and sit in shanty group singing circles and all sorts of weird stuff that like it's so fascinating, and you learn so much, and then you have such local pride, like as if it were your home, and it could be your home. And I think traveling like that makes you realize how you can live your life like in so many different ways and be really happy. There's no like one way to live your life. And there's so many like amazing communities and people. And so, I mean, what you're describing, it's like the best way to travel is through the eyes of the locals.
So it's weird in that, like, I was born and raised here. I've lived within 5 miles my entire life. I grew up insanely poor. And so I didn't get to start traveling until I was in my 20s and even mid 20s at that. So now, like when I go to a city, when I go to like San Francisco, I was like, I don't want to know the top 3 places on Yelp. It's like, let me get to page 3 and find the shit, or I'll just ask people. I was like, okay, where do I need to go? I was like, that's cool. Don't tell me where the other people go. I was like, tell me where. And that's what I was saying. Like when I went to New York, I went and saw the Larry Wilmore show. This is one of the last times I went. And I was like, screw it. I just need food. So I pulled up Yelp and pulled up the map and then just looked at all the places around. I was like, Nope. They paid for that ad. Nope. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's an Italian place. Went in there, tiny, nobody in there, insanely authentic Italian food. And I was like, yeah, this is the shit. This is screw all these other places. This is where I need to be. And then walked out there and felt like I immediately either needed to walk for 5 miles or take a nap. Like it was so heavy and delicious. But yeah, I'm curious because you sound like when you travel or tour, you actually get out. Like that kind of blows my mind when I hear musicians that I've met and stuff. Like they roll into the town, they sleep during the day, and then they go out and perform, and then they go on to the next one. Maybe they'll stop at a Waffle House.
When you're like living like that, like for the whole year, like some bands are on tour for like 10 months of the year, like so crazy, then like you have to do that. After a while, it's just like everywhere is the same. Like people are dysfunctional everywhere in the world. Like, you know what I mean? Oh, look, it's another, like when we went on tour in November, December 2019, we're like, okay, we're going to go to like every Christmas market and we're going to have like Glühwein and like, we're going to have all this like, you know, like hot, like the mulled wine, you know, the German mulled wine. And we were like, it's just going to be the greatest. So it was our goal, like on that tour, to go to like every Christmas market in the center of town. And we were like, literally, we probably went to like, I don't know, 15 Christmas markets. And at the end of it, they just are all the same. And we're like, I never want to see another Christmas market again. Maybe until next year, at least. We really did Christmas into the ground that year. And we were just like, and after a while, like a lot of it's just, you're like, okay, like you're another place. And the culture, you know, is really interesting, but you're not going to get a taste of the culture by just like going to the city center for a few hours. It's just not. So like, it's not a huge deal. Like if you miss out or sleep through it one day or like are sick or, but because you're not really getting the full experience, but it is nice to, you know, go for walks and like, you know, get snacks at the markets and like go to a museum. But yeah, it's very limited. Like the actual cultural experiences that you're getting when you're touring and just in a place for a few hours at a time is very limited.
And maybe that's the difference of like, so there was one company I worked for that I got to go to a conference every year in different cities. And so when I did that, there were always two things I always did. I always booked time before or after to stay like 3 or 4 days extra so I could really go out and explore. But then also the minute we got out of our conference at like 4 or 5, I was like, I'm not on your time anymore. I'm going and doing my own shit. And sometimes other coworkers would come to the conference with me, and I would just look at them and say, "You're on your own after 4 or 5, because I'm going to go do. I'm going to do as much as I humanly can."
Totally. And like when I go, like when I last year, I had to cancel. I was going to Ireland for a few months, and my whole flight got canceled. But then I was just like, thank God, because I didn't want to be stuck in a country that I didn't know, in a town I didn't know. Like when everything was closed, I would not have any friends there or any support. And so it actually ended up being fine. But the way that I, was doing it is that I was booking gigs in Dublin and Galway and like all these. So during the time that I was there, I maybe would only have like between, 1 and 3 concerts set up for like, I don't know, a 5-week period, but I'd be going to music events on a nightly basis. Oftentimes when you go to music events, even if they're like, just free music events like open mics or songwriting circles, you meet a ton of people that are somewhat well connected and know what's going on, and then frequently will get gigs from just having gone to that event. So it's all about like networking, and you don't go intentionally being like, I'm going to network tonight. You're just like you show up and you want to have like a legitimate like cultural experience and figure out what's going on in the city. Like what's the vibe here? And so I go out when I go to a new city, at least 3 or 4, like, nights per week in the beginning to try to get a sense of like, what is this place about? What is like the recurring theme? What's the music? Like, what is the music scene here? And I just put myself in and I'll literally go to an open mic night and like no one knows who I am. I don't know anyone there. And then I will meet people that way, and I get a lot of opportunities through having gone to these places
Okay.
and like performing sort of like anonymously. And so that to me is like one of the best, like they're just fun because there's no pressure. People are there to just like hang out with their friends and meet new people, and like people are really putting themselves out there, even people that are really like low level beginner like musicians. It like kind of takes a lot to get up and play. So there's a level of like, I like that like non-professional setting where people are just like being, you know, having fun and being themselves. And that gives you a sense of like, just, yeah, I think it's just good. I think it's great to go to events like that, even if you're on a tour, if you have time to go to a live music event, or even if you're not involved, or maybe you do play a couple songs or something, whatever the case may be. That's a great way to get gigs, is to just constantly go to music performances on a non-professional level.
I think I see a lot around here, like all of a sudden, I'm trying to think, it's like 5 or 6 years ago, all of a sudden this new batch of singer-songwriter people just all of a sudden emerged. This new scene emerged around here. And it's not like they were like 21-year-old kids. They were like 30, 35-year-olds. And they started something that I had kind of seen before, but it seemed a lot bigger now, which are these trade shows where, you know, they would, two of the guys, instead of going with their band, it would just be two of the guys, and they would go play some bar in Louisville, Kentucky. And people would come to that show and be like, oh, I've never been to Knoxville. And so those two guys would be like, okay, let me help you get a show in Knoxville at this bar that has music 5 nights out of the week. Come on down and we'll hook that up. And then the people who came down from Louisville will be like, okay, now it's time for you to come up to Louisville and let's book you and your band in this bar. And it just kept on. They kept building these trade shows to where those two guys ended up booking this kind of crazy tour around the South because they had built up all this networking or goodwill in other cities to where they have a small following of 10 to 15 people who bring more people. And then they have all these other bands that they helped hook up with shows here. Yeah. And it just kind of organically grew.
People like the industry, it's all about people and your relationships. And like, whether it's not even all about talent, it's about talent, but it's like, if you're a really cool person and people like want to help you and you want to help them, then like, yeah, I think if you're a cool person and you're nice to people, then like, you know, you get what you put in sort of back.
Right.
So I think that a lot of it is being social and actually getting out there, even when you're tired and you don't want to go out. You're like, I really should, because nothing's ever going to happen if I sit in this house.
Right.
Like, you know, and so it's good to, and I'm such an old lady. I'm just, I don't like loud places. Like when I walk into a bar, like I'm just like, is it loud in here? Like I'm always like, I'm just tired. Like I want to go to like a jazz bar and have like a glass of wine and just be left alone. You know what I mean? I'm just like, I don't want to stand for 2 hours like at a concert where people are like elbow to elbow. I'm kind of like senile when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like I am not interested in going to that type of venue. And like, even with, you know, if it were like some of my favorite performers, like, I just don't care. I want to be comfortable. Like my body, I need to feel relaxed when I'm listening to music, or else I actually can't enjoy myself.
Right.
So yeah, I go to.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the cigar thing is a funny thing like that for me. And that there's me and there's two buddies and I that been like 10 or 12 years where we are trying to be the non-douchebaggy cigar people. Because you always have the guys that are like bragging and boasting about, I was like, I just want to go in, be very low key and just sit there. And it's a relaxation and communal thing for me. Kind of like what you're saying with music. Because like, I can't tell you how many times I've made friends in cities just because I went to a cigar shop and just sat there and be like, I can choose not to talk to that person, or I can choose to talk to that person.
It's so, and like you meet so many. I have this group that I used to be sort of like a part of on a weekly basis in this little town in Cornwall called Loo,
Hmm.
which is in southwest England, the
Okay.
coastal southwest England. And Cornwall, like traditionally, like was not originally considered part of England, and the
Okay.
Cornish have Celtic origins, so they were not treated well by the British historically, and many of them to this day still find it like offensive to be referred to as English because that's not
Wow.
actually like it's a sort of a different sort of tribe.
Okay.
So of people. So they like were like their professions were historically like mining and fishing and farming.
Right.
And so the fishermen like would sing these songs on the shore when the conditions were bad to keep up the morale,
Okay.
on the water. And they were called shanties, and they would
Right.
all sing them. And it was really like done to form this community and to feel a sense of home when they were away at sea. And so this shanty culture is like really heavily part of the Cornish tradition, and they have still to this day, many people really just have, there's so much like a lot of local pride down there. And even people that are not from Cornwall, like find, in different areas, they find the community so meaningful and the culture so meaningful that they sort of immerse themselves and become part of these groups. So there's like some shanty groups throughout Cornwall. And
Hmm.
there was one that used to play at the oldest pub in town called the Jolly Sailor every Tuesday and Thursday. One was actually like the shanty specific group, and then pretty much the same members of the group would also host a songwriting circle on the Thursday. And it was like this incredible, like intimate event where there were no mics.
Hmm.
And it was almost like the actual, there was like the bar. It was like a really old fashioned pub, like a really,
Hmm.
really old building from like, I don't know if it was like the 1500, but very, very old. And one part of the bar, it's like separated. So the people that want to drink and socialize kind of are at the bar. And then the whole room is sort of like dedicated to these music nights, no microphones at all, and people are incredibly respectful and just like listen. And so it's like this incredible like community of people that are genuinely like want to hear the voices of others. And so some people are singing these traditional shanty songs, and then you learn them and you sing them with others, and it's like really fun. And then other people are singing songs that they wrote, or people that, there was this one song that I recorded last year and put on YouTube, and it's called the Good Night Song. And I learned it at this pub in this shanty group. And a friend of mine, he played the song, and the song is by a guy named Jim Boys, and
Okay.
it's about it's on YouTube if you Google like the Good Night Song Samantha Preis. It's a beautiful song about how meeting people, you don't along your journey, you don't know if you're gonna, when you're gonna see them again, or
Right.
but you'll see them further on down the road. And so I learned this song in this shanty group, and from this community I performed. In the future, I booked gigs at festivals, at like just a bunch of different venues, just from having been in this community and meeting musicians on a weekly basis. But it was so meaningful, like, because I fell in love with this song, the Good Night Song, that my friend Brendan was playing, and I loved it so much. And then we would sing and play it together. And he was in his maybe early 70s. And then I think it was either right before COVID hit or was like during COVID, he just like randomly died. I mean, it was so like sudden, and people were so like shocked in the music community because he was such an important part of that group and such an immense talent and like storyteller. And it was so like it was so meaningful because that was like even that song, it was like the whole meaning of the song. I mean, just this guy that would sing the song week after week, and that I fell in love with to the point where we would play it together, and then I recorded it. It just seemed like so strange, the whole thing. But I mean, the relationships that you form in these like meaningful groups that are, there's nothing like vain about it. You know, people are just in like an unmiked setting that they just have this like guitar, or sometimes they'll just sing like an a cappella song. Like someone will just sing some beautiful like hymn or a shanty or something, and everyone just listens. And I love, those are my favorite types of music settings, the listening room experiences. But I think that the most meaningful experiences, most of the most meaningful experiences that I've had have been some of the non gigs where I was even featured, just being in those groups,
Right.
and hearing people's voices, and hearing new music, and it was just like incredibly inspiring and meaningful. And it's a great way to try to get like a grasp on the culture of a new place.
Yeah, we have something very similar in that there's a section of town downtown called the Old City, and there used to be this bar called Patrick Sullivan's, and there's this group of people that they would meet like every Tuesday night. They would bring their own instruments, and it was very old school, like Scottish, music, all that. And then Patrick Sullivan's closed, and a guy who owns a company here in town and is very rich bought the building across the street and fixed it up because his wife was part of that group or wanted to be part of that group.
Mm-hmm.
And so he essentially created a Scottish pub with 3 rooms, the bar room, the music room, and then an extra room. And so they meet every Wednesday, and there's instruments that line the walls. You don't have to bring your own instrument. There's a fiddle, there's a banjo, there's a guitar, like whatever you want to play, there's something on the wall for you to play. And they meet every Wednesday, and it's used there for a while. It was 50 and above, it wasn't set in stone, but that's just who came to those. And then slowly some younger people have started coming to where now it just keeps going to where it's kind of crazy.
I love it. I love those types of events. And like it, I like events that are like, I like spending time with, I love young people. Obviously, I love people that are my age, but I also like going to events where some of the people are a little older, because the element of like vanity has been removed, and people are not. And I think the younger generations are like much more concerned with like their appearance, and they're much more insecure about like what they're playing. So maybe they're, maybe playing stuff like that they think they have to play, or like trying to sound a certain way that they think
or trying to be perfect,
whatever the case may be. But I think that's not all the time. Of course, the older people can be like that too. But like, I generally like going to events like that. For people who maybe like it's just one of their true loves, and like they just work, at a bank during the day, and they come in because it's something that they're really passionate about, and they do it every week. And there's like this level of like honesty, and also like imperfection. Like people aren't super concerned with being like absolutely perfect, and people are supportive like nonetheless, and come back week after week because they're fans of the whole experience,
So like I was saying with that station WDVX earlier, like now their radio station is in the visitor center downtown, heart of downtown. Mm-hmm. And they do live shows throughout the week. They do this weekly show or daily show, except on Sundays, called the Blue Plate Special. Every day from noon to 1, they have 2 musicians come in, bands, individual artists come in and play every day. And then Wednesday night is Tennessee Shines, which is in the Scottish place, to where it's usually a bigger artist. And then Thursday night is the Swerve with Wayne Bledsoe, who is a writer here in town. And he usually has local or people he's built up this relationship over the years. But it's insane how many big bands now I've seen in those environments. Like the Avett Brothers got their start doing Blue Plate because they were just they were in Virginia, North Carolina, whichever one. They were just over there. So they would come play the Wednesday show or the daily shows and then the Thursday night show are all free. So if you were just traveling through town, you could pop in and see, what's his name? David Lowery from Cracker perform at the Blue Plate special. Or, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Or I'm trying to think of other bands like St. Paul and the Broken Bones is one. Lake Street Dive is one that they kind of started where it would be me and 4 other people.
Right.
Seeing these people play. And it's just I think that's why a lot of people love this city is because they can come to those shows to where it's same thing. Like you could have you ever heard the band Cracker? Like
No.
90s. Oh, they're great. Although I will recommend Cracker, David Lowery. But he had like a huge hit on MTV called Low, that they were kind of a one-hit wonder, but they are still a critically acclaimed band. But you could see him perform, and then after him, like he was probably multi-Grammy nominated, if not winner. And then the next act could be some bluegrass band from the outer county that one of the guys a parole officer, one of the guys works in a cafeteria at a school, right. And it's just like this weird dichotomy of everyone is equal here. Everyone is equal here.
Right.
Here's Rhiannon Giddens. Do you know Rhiannon Giddens?
Yeah. Yep.
So she did a Blue Plate during Big Ears. She curated Big Ears the last year we had Big Ears. And, but she did one with that guy. Shoot, she plays with him a lot and I can't remember his name. And he's but it's just funny. Like everyone is equal. Like she comes and plays that. And then you have Emmy Sunshine, who's become this phenomenon around here that she started playing when she was like 6. And she's from the most rural county ever. And she was featured in a documentary on Elvis. She got on American Idol, which seems like a step backwards for her because she already has this huge following. But it's interesting seeing that kind of stuff.
There's so much talent. There's so much talent out there and just like really interesting perspectives and meeting new people. That's what I miss the most is not so much the actual performing itself, but all the momentum around performing, the new experiences, meeting new people, meeting new musicians, being inspired by others. That's what I miss the most about non-COVID life is the momentum of performing, but not the actual being on stage per se. Not that I haven't had really great times on stage, but I think it's everything around performing is exciting.
Okay.
Inspiring.
Okay. I'm going to go back all the way back to the beginning.
Okay.
So you name drop somebody that I'm a huge fan of. So Devin Townsend, because it's funny because I've listened to your music and I'm like, it is the complete opposite of what I would assume. Strapping young lad or Devin Townsend. Like he actually came up like 2 weeks ago. There's a buddy of mine that he posted on Facebook, something like, here's my top 5 guitar players of all time. And he listed 5 guitar players. And I looked through the thread and there was 100 people that responded. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try and look for people that nobody's mentioned. And I said, the most underrated guitar player right now is Devin Townsend because not enough people listen to heavy metal to know what a ungodly guitar player he is. So
amazing.
Like how you said you and your sister. So did your sister also go to Berkeley too?
No, no, but she did come on the Devin Townsend tour. So we were just doing like background singing for him on the tour. We were doing I was like, he asked me like, and weirdly enough, like I met Devin through Twitter.
That's hilarious.
I literally met him through Twitter. Like it's so funny, but like we were just sending like emojis to each other for like a year or two before we actually, and it was just like totally random and like, but I love that because, I was posting all these pictures of like animals all the time because I was like house sitting. I was actually house sitting. That's how it was very expensive. It's very expensive to travel. So especially if you're doing it last minute, it can be really expensive. So I'd like watch someone's cat for 6 weeks and stay in like some unbelievable house in an unbelievable city. and the whole thing was free. So I saved
Yeah.
so much money. I got to spend all my money on traveling and experiences rather than paying rent. And so I would constantly post pictures of like animals. And what's so funny is that when he asked me if I would lead this choir, he was like, yeah, like I just feel like you constantly post pictures of animals. And so you must be a really cool person. He was
That's
like, I
amazing.
love your music. He wasn't like, oh my God, I love that song. I really dug it. I like love your voice. He was like, you must be cool because like you post a lot of pictures of animals.
That's
Like, I'm sure he listened to it, but I think he's more like looking for like being around just genuine,
Yeah.
really nice people. And that was one of the reasons why the European tour was like so incredible, because Devin is also like extremely avant-garde and very alternative, but he wants to surround himself with people that are not like sort of vain and that are genuine and gentle, and like there's not going to be any sort of like drama, and so that particular mix of people ended up being like one of the most magical experiences, just coincidentally, because you never know like what a group of people are going to be like together until you actually put them together and they're like living together for 6 weeks or 2 months. In our case, it was like, we had like 10 days of rehearsals, and then the tour itself was like a full month or something. So we were all on like a really tight tour bus, using the exact, it's just like, it's very like an intimate situation. So people could get on each other's nerves, and like, you just never know what's going to happen on these tours. But this particular group was like really special. And even the thing is though, that everything is like, you can never replicate anything. So even though something is, really perfect, the next time it's going to be different. So it might be equally great in a different way, but it'll never be the same. And so that was like a really special moment in time where like at the end, when everyone was like leaving, everyone was like crying and like literally people were like sobbing. It was just like it was like beautiful. It was like an incredible experience. But I met Devin through Twitter, and I think we're both like super alternative, and like he's putting out a project soon that I'm not going to say anything about because but it's cool. I mean, I there's some weird stuff in there. Like I've done some really weird stuff, and actually one of my favorite things to do are and after I finish this album, I think I'm gonna maybe do like a portion of my YouTube channel I will maybe dedicate to this, but I really find effect singing fascinating, and so I've done some of that for Devin along with regular singing, and I really enjoy that, like just vocal improvisation, even the weird stuff, like just like literally like making weird dinosaur noises. I'm not even kidding. So I'm like, I love like tribal singing. I mean, you can sound angelic and you can sound like an animal, or you could sound like goofy, and so I like that sort of improvisational stuff. And I like working with Devin because he's like totally open-minded about that stuff. And it's just, and he doesn't give a shit, he doesn't care what people think. At all.
And
that is what I love about him. That is what I love about him.
It's crazy because his range is so weird. Like you go back to like the strapping.
He's a bigger range than I do.
Yeah, like the strapping young lad.
Sing like higher. I'm serious.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not even talking about his vocal. I'm talking about like you go back to strapping.
Like Broadway. It's like he's like a Broadway like singer. Yeah. Like he has like a strong Broadway singer. And I always was like, you should write like a heavy metal.
Oh hell yeah! Oh hell yeah!
Like with like Muppets and shit. You know what I mean? Like that would be like amazing because he already has like Ziltoid and all these cool characters.
Yeah.
But and I think he may. I don't know if but like he's so theatrical, but he has such a theatrical voice. He actually sounds like he's like a trained musical theater singer at times. It's just like unbelievable what he's able to do with his voice. And then there's the heavy metal like screaming,
Yeah, the strapping young lad stuff. So it's funny. He did one of the best things that I end up quoting him to a lot of people, and that he played here at the Bijou, and he came out, and I think he played a song, and then he got done, and he was like, "All right, here's what we're going to do." He's like, "I'm going to get in 3 different rock positions and take your photos." And he was like, and when you take that third photo, take your phone, put it in your pocket, and let's just enjoy the night. And I was like, that is chef's kiss. That's brilliant. To just be like, yeah, don't be sitting there photoing, video. And he's like, no. And then he had, of course, because it's him, he had fun with it to where he was doing like crazy, like crazy poses and shit. And I was like, that's brilliant right there. And funnily enough, I took my dad to see Bonnie Raitt. And it was same thing.
Bonnie Raitt. Oh,
it was same thing. When you walked in, the ushers and everyone were like, no cameras, no phone, no video. If you do it, you'll get ejected. And so she did her show, and then she came out for the encore, and she said, you all did really good. Pull out them phones. Let's get some pictures. And she kind of did the same thing. And I was like, that's brilliant. So you don't have somebody the entire show doing this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. It's like, it can be really distracting with the lights. Like already you have like these hot, like lights on you, and like, you can't really even see past the first couple rows. And then on top of it, people are like they're not even turning their flashes off. And you're like, oh my God.
It's so for me, although I will say I am the guy that I'm like, I want to get one shot early and post it to Instagram, and then I'll put my phone away. But I would love to get one good shot. And it's funny how many times I've gotten one good shot and that band has reposted that photo.
Yeah.
Because I'm anal. And exactly what you were saying earlier. I'm sitting there tapping it and doing the contrast.
I can't even watch myself too. Like we had like a documentary done on that tour, then like they interviewed us and like they filmed the whole thing, and like I can't like watch it. I'm just like, I can't watch myself. It's so unhealthy. I feel like so self-deprecating every time I like watch myself. It's like, it's not like good. I can't. I'm just like, once I performed, like, I don't want to see it.
So the irony of what we're doing right now, I hate the sound of my voice, and I do not like being on stage, but there have been times where I've had to get up and speak on stage to hundreds, if not that. And it's just like, I just have to do this. I have to do this because I can't be 80 and regret not doing this. And it's the same thing with these podcasts. It's like, I know too many cool people that the other people, and that sounds super arrogant, but it's like, I know too many cool people that need to have their story out there that will never do it unless it's somebody like me going, hey, you're going to do this. And like, I think the example I gave you is the first episode of this I did was with my friend Donovan, and she had just come back from mountain biking in the Czech Republic. I was like, you got to tell that story. Like that's an insane story. Like, who the hell does that? Like, who the hell? It's like, you do that. Okay, we'll start rolling in. So you mentioned a Patreon. Have you done any like Zoom shows or anything in all of this?
Well, you know what? I haven't done any live shows online. I don't know. I did one. I did one show in the beginning with some other artists just for like this sort of like radio station like in Connecticut that asked me to do some stuff in my hometown. But I used to do like a site called Concert Window.
Oh yeah.
And I used to do those like I started doing them twice a month, and I just felt like once a month was like a little bit better because like more people would show up to like, I would rather like people have a little bit of like not be able to rely on me, you know, being like, okay, this is really special. I'm going to mark my calendar because she's not going to be performing for another month. And so there'd be like, so I found that performing once a month was good on Concert Window. And then I don't know like what could have possibly caused them to like close down, because I would think that they were making a decent amount of money because they were taking like 20% of the proceeds every time, which I felt was like really high.
Yeah.
And like, it seemed like a ton of people were booked, and I'm not sure if they were like trying new ventures and like they failed at it or like what the case was, but I was like, how expensive could it be to like run this? But they completely like shut down, and like people were telling me about that site called Stage It. So I actually tried to do Stage It like twice, and like both times it like just, I don't know, like it didn't work. First of all, I hate Flash. I don't even know why anyone's using Flash anymore. Like if we can do this and we don't have to have Flash in order to do this?
Yeah.
And why can't these web performance series,
Yeah.
like, I don't know, maybe Stage It has like moved away from Flash, because I think they sent me an email or something that said that maybe they were going to do that at some point. I just haven't been back, but I've really just been focusing on trying to get stuff done on the recording and, the kind of like boring technical end of things,
Right.
that I've just tried to, I'm already like so busy and it's a little bit stressful at times that I try not to add any extra. Like we were saying before, like during COVID, I think a lot of people in the beginning, I actually felt like pressure to be super productive. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get so much done. I'm going to like put out this crowdfunding campaign. I'm going to like get the pre-order in. I'm going to start working on this album. And I actually put unnecessary pressure on myself, that sort of like in a way it was unhealthy. And like, if I ever do another pre-order campaign, it's going to be like literally when all the mixing is done and all that's left is to press the record so that the record will be out like a month from the pre-order type of thing, like not like before I ever even started like working on anything. So I think that was a really good like learning experience. But this year to me has been all about just the creative process, when I can sit down and actually write something. But a lot of it has just been like sitting down, tweaking recordings, doing some projects for other people. I'm currently working on this music video right now. And yeah, I've stayed pretty busy, but I haven't done any. I did one performance like last year when COVID started after a month or so, and that was it. So
I will say a friend of mine, she did something I thought was really interesting, although it was funny watching her and her husband tackle the technical issues of doing live, because they had, I'm trying to think, 4 different computers set up. 3 different computers and a phone. So she was on Instagram Live, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live all at the same time. And depending on which one you tuned in, you're at a slightly different angle. So see her husband, like every once in a while, she would be like, oh, that one went down. And you would hear her husband in the background, like, oh, shit. Like, but what she did,
did you see the Devin live show where he has like a mixer going with like oh my god, it was like so brilliant and hilarious. Like he had like this whole like MacGyver situation set up where he had like a literal, like it was like a fan where he put one phone on a fan that was like moving like this, and
that's
then
hilarious.
Like a mixer or something that had a fan attached to it, so there looked like there was like weird like crazy motion. And then so we had like 4 or 5 different cameras, and it was like, honestly, I was like, I don't even particularly think of myself as like a technically like, just, I don't consider myself like technically impaired, but I'm also not like a wizard, when it comes to this stuff. But like, it was just like mind boggling to see what he was able to pull off for this thing. And I'm worried about, like, the most important thing I'm worried about, and I'm like shocked it's actually lasted this long, is just like my modem.
So I will say,
where does the Wi-Fi connection dropping?
There was a point where you were talking about vocal effects, and your Zoom actually screwed up, and it sounded like you were doing vocal effects. I was like, "Oh my god!" You have to listen back. It doesn't surprise me that about him, because I feel like a little bit of like the creative brain is, I don't want to do this boring. I need to make this interesting for me. It's like, I don't give a shit what other people think about it. I need to make it interesting for me. Like, and I think of that. But I was going to say is my friend, what she did was she had released like an EP and 3 albums, and her new album was coming out. So what she did was like every Thursday, it was like tune in live, and I'm going to perform each one of these in full. And that'll be the entire broadcast. And it was just like her in her baby's room, with it turned around to where you could just see the wall. You can see, and she just performed solo acoustic, like the entire, like the EP. And then she's like, all right, thanks for coming next Thursday, first album, and did that. And I was like, that's a great way to, because same thing, what we were talking about with social media is that's a no brainer for content in my mind. It's like, it's going to take an hour to an hour and 10 minutes. And she would talk a little bit at the beginning, but for the most part, she just played straight through. I was like,
she faced the camera away from her.
No. What I mean is she was in her baby's room, so the crib was behind the camera.
Okay.
So she was just, it was her,
Yeah.
kind of like you with the blank wall behind you. Like it was kind of just her in a corner. And I think at one point she was like, this is my baby's room. If you could see what was going on
Yeah.
behind the cameras, it's hilarious. I think of the same thing.
I
It's like,
wish like people just didn't have to like look at anything like they used to in the 60s and 70s, and they just listened to something on the radio and like that was enough. I actually find it to be like just a lot of pressure to constantly be like in people's vision all the time, like on social media or like if it's a live show online, and to constantly be like on camera or like that's very stressful to me. So I like kind of, yeah, I have like, I don't know. I think maybe I'm like a perfectionist in some way. So like in most artistic ways. So that like has everything to do with like how I perform or like how I look on camera or like whether the aesthetic is good enough around me or so I just at a certain point I'm just like I don't care about any of it. I'm just gonna if I think about this I'll actually go insane. So just like press play or press record. But yeah.
Have you ever heard the band The Paper Kites?
Yes.
So their new album, which every song has a female, it's a female duet with another musician. And they did something interesting for their videos. All their videos, they release videos for all of them, and they're all abstract. Like one of them is literally just on a interstate overpass, and you're just seeing at night, and you're seeing the cars. And then another one is like they filmed like abstract field, and then they projected it on a woman laying in a bed in the middle of a field or in the middle of a room or something. And I was like, this is brilliant because it's just one static shot. So, you know, what you're saying about facing away, it's like, oh yeah, it's like, this is, we'll find something cool and then we'll just put our song underneath. It's like, don't overthink it, just do it. Although
so yeah, I feel that like it's like less, it's better in some ways. You have more control about like when you release, even if it's just like for YouTube or if it's not perfect, like in terms of being on an album or anything, but it's just something that you release on social media, but you have the creative control to kind of do stuff with it.
Right.
But I think as a sort of perfectionist, one of the things I don't like performing live is like, because I'm a perfectionist.
Yeah.
Can't always control everything in the moment. And like, that's one of the things that people love so much about it is the imperfection of it. But I'm like, no, like I'd much rather like work on something and release it when I'm happy with it, or at least content with it, than, you know, have to like watch myself perform something live and be like, oh no, you know, like it's that's one of the reasons why if I am filmed like doing something like on that documentary or like just in general, like if someone like I don't really want to watch it because like there's no point. It already happened. It's there, it's recorded. Like how's it gonna help me like to just like, you know, bash myself? It's not healthy. So I think some of it, you know, can help you be like, well, I'm not going to perform it. You know, in terms of just self-critiquing yourself and like trying to work on yourself as an artist, it's helpful to like watch yourself and be like, yeah, I think I'm gonna like not do it that way this time because I don't know if I love that version. I don't know if I love, you know, the way you perform something, or even just like your posture. You're like, wow, I look like a complete humpback because I'm like, you know, it's just like whatever. I mean, you learn things so that you can fix them in the future, but sometimes it just gets out of hand and you're like, yeah. So I think I wish I could just be like completely like Sia like gets it. Right. She's just like, no, this is not going to be about like my aesthetic. I mean, in some ways it became her aesthetic because she had no aesthetic. Like that was cool. And if I could, you know, like just kind of do that in a somewhat anonymous way, like I would just release the music and not feel pressure to do all sorts of other stuff to it, like making music videos or forcing it to be, you know, part of a bigger work, like an album, like just releasing things as they go. But the way that the world is today and what people are looking for from, you know, a business sense and from a place where you actually do have to do this stuff in order to make a living, you have to like sort of make compromises and like do things that people want you to do. You know, so if you have a balance, you just have to figure out where your spot is, you know.
I think that's why I like people like two that do it very well, I think, is Lord Huron and St. Vincent. Because I feel like from album to album, they're like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to stay on brand for this album. And then when it comes to the next one, we're just going to do something completely different. And that fascinates me. Like I've seen St. Vincent perform 5 or 6 times. And every time she does it completely different. And I was like, I feel like she's doing it like, this is how I'm going to do it. This is how I feel comfortable doing this. I'm not going to do this how other people want me to do it. I've got to do it this way. And same thing with the Lord Huron guy. I feel like it's the exact same thing. He's like, I'm going to establish an aesthetic for the stage show, for the album, and everything's just going to carry together. And that's going to be, and it's almost like that kind of helps bridge what you're talking about. Like, of course, graphic design. I'm talking about staying on brand. Like, it's just like,
right.
It's almost like Steve Jobs and wearing the black turtleneck and jeans. I don't have to think about this because I've established this and I just get to move forward and do the thing. So I find that interesting. Those are the two that I think do that the best, that they don't feel like they're trying to reinvent themselves. They just feel like this is what I'm going to do. This is what's interesting to me. And that's how we're going to get through this.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for doing this.
It was lovely. What a pleasant surprise. I did not realize that you'd be such a wonderful conversationalist.
Shit. No, hardly. I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot that went to a high school that, the fact that I did not think about daylight saving time would be different. It's hilarious in that when I was in high school, the head football coach either taught geography or history. I don't know which one, because I showed up to class and he was like, all right, you and Jeff go down to the weight room. And we would work out and clean up the weight room. Or Jeff and I were both artists, so we would paint the advertising signs for the football field. And I was like, I don't know if it was history or geography. I have no idea what this class was, because I never showed, like, education it was something I did on my own. It was not something I did in school. I would always get angry in school. But like, I don't want to read Macbeth. I want to read Sherlock Holmes because that's interesting to me. Fight with my teacher over that. I was like, hey, you got somebody who wants to read. Why don't you encourage that instead of whatever? Yeah. But thank you for being on.
Awesome.